This is the largest active volcano in the United States, and it's sitting just below this very national park that we're in right now called Yellowstone National Park. It's so big they can't even see the whole thing. But how big is this supervolcano, and what would happen if it erupted? We'll answer these questions and more in today's episode of What If? If there was one place in the world where you didn't want to be when it erupted, it would be here. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be exploring Yellowstone Supervolcano. But before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. Yellowstone National Park is home to bison, bears, and some pretty interesting geysers. But hidden beneath the surface lies something much more sinister, an absolute behemoth of a supervolcano. The Yellowstone Supervolcano is so large that it's actually referred to as a magma chamber, rather than a single magma chamber. This magma chamber is roughly the size of the entire state of Wyoming. That's over 97,000 square kilometers. And while this may not sound like a lot, this region is large enough to fit the entirety of Belgium and the Netherlands stacked together. So how did such a massive magma chamber form, and why does it continue to grow to this day? A caldera is simply a large crater formed by a volcanic eruption or series of eruptions. Over time, if the magma chamber continues to fill up with magma, it can eventually lead to another eruption. In the case of Yellowstone, there have been 3 major eruptions in the past, and each has left behind its own caldera. These 3 calderas are the Yellowstone caldera, which formed after the first eruption, the Mesa Falls caldera, which formed after the second eruption, and the Lava Creek caldera, which formed after the third eruption. These 3 calderas are arranged in a line and are responsible for the roughly circular shape of the supervolcano. The first eruption occurred around 2.1 million years ago, and was the beginning of the Yellowstone hotspot. The magma plume that is the Yellowstone hotspot has been creating new features at the surface ever since the initial eruption. Over the next 500,000 years, magma continued to accumulate in the mantle plume, and the Yellowstone hotspot grew steadily in size. This led to the second eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano about 1.3 million years ago. Both of these eruptions were fairly small compared to the eruption that occurred about 640,000 years ago. This eruption was about 2,800 times more powerful than the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. This makes it one of the largest eruptions in Earth history. The total volume of material ejected during this eruption was around 2,500 cubic kilometers. To put that into perspective, this is roughly equivalent to the volume of Mount Everest. Since then, the Yellowstone supervolcano has only had 2 small eruptions. One was about 13,000 years ago, and the other was 700 years ago. And while there have been no major eruptions in the last few thousand years, scientists are still concerned about the potential danger posed by this supervolcano. In order to better understand the potential impact of a Yellowstone supereruption, we need to first take a closer look at the volcano itself. The magma chamber beneath Yellowstone is divided into 3 different regions based on their depth. The upper mantle is located between 0 and 70 kilometers below the surface. The middle crust is located between 70 and 25 kilometers below the surface, and the lower crust is located between 25 and 50 kilometers below the surface. Each of these layers has a different composition which affects the type of magma that is generated. The upper mantle is mostly solid rock, but it contains some pockets of molten rock. This molten rock is less dense than the surrounding solid rock, so it rises to the surface. As it rises, it begins to melt the surrounding rock, creating more molten rock. This process eventually creates a pool of molten rock known as a magma chamber. The temperature of the magma chamber is around 1200 degrees Celsius. This hot magma is extremely dangerous, but it's also the source of the geothermal features that make Yellowstone National Park so famous. As the magma chamber fills up, the pressure increases until it's greater than the strength of the surrounding rock. At this point, the magma chamber erupts, releasing all of the built-up pressure and hot magma. When this happens, it can cause massive earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The pressure from the magma chamber can also cause the surrounding rock to collapse, creating huge craters known as calderas. Over the past few million years, Yellowstone has experienced several major eruptions. The most recent was about 640,000 years ago. During this eruption, a massive amount of ash and gas was released into the atmosphere. The ash covered large parts of North America and caused widespread devastation. The gas caused global temperatures to plummet, leading to an ice age. But what would happen if it erupted today? If the Yellowstone supervolcano erupted today, It would be a disaster of epic proportions. The immediate area would be completely destroyed as the hot magma chamber would incinerate everything in its path. The blast would also trigger massive earthquakes, causing further damage to the surrounding area. Ash and gas would be released into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun and causing global temperatures to plummet. This would cause an ice age which could last for centuries. Crops would fail and food shortages would occur worldwide. The ash and gas would also cause respiratory problems and other health issues, especially for those with asthma or other respiratory conditions. People would need to wear masks while outside and all outdoor activities would be canceled. But it's not just the immediate effects that we need to worry about. The Yellowstone Supervolcano is so large that the magma chamber extends far beyond the borders of Yellowstone National Park. If the volcano erupted, the surrounding states of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming would also be affected. The ash and gas would travel across the country and affect people far away from Yellowstone. The economic impact would be devastating as the U.S. economy is heavily reliant on agriculture and tourism. With crops failing and people unable to travel to Yellowstone National Park, the economy would come to a grinding halt. In fact, the impact of a Yellowstone super eruption would be felt around the world. The ice age would affect growing seasons and food production everywhere, and the ash would eventually make its way into the air and water systems, affecting both human and animal life. Now let's say that you were in Yellowstone National Park when the eruption occurred. You survived the initial blast and the earthquake, but now you're surrounded by thick ash and toxic gases. Visibility is poor and it's difficult to breathe. You need to find shelter immediately. Look for a cave or a crevice in the rocks. If you can find a cave, be sure to bring a gas mask if you have one. If you can't find a cave, then build a shelter out of rocks and debris. This will help to protect you from the falling ash and any subsequent pyroclastic flows. Make sure to stay inside your shelter until the eruption is over. If you venture outside, you may be exposed to lethal levels of volcanic gases. Assuming that you survive the initial eruption, you'll need to be careful of the ash. The ash will be hot and sharp and can easily cut your skin. It can also cause respiratory problems and other health issues. To protect yourself from the ash, wear a mask or a scarf over your mouth and nose. You should also wear goggles to protect your eyes. If possible, try to stay indoors and away from windows. If you're driving in the area, pull over and abandon your car. The roads will be quickly covered in ash and it will be difficult to navigate. Try to find a safe place to wait out the eruption. If you're hiking in the area, turn around and head back to your car. Once the eruption is over, you may need to search and rescue operations. So it's important to stay together in a group. But what if you were outside of the immediate area? Even if you were outside the immediate blast radius, you would still need to be careful. The ash and gas would eventually make their way to your location. This could happen through two main mechanisms. The first is through the air. The ash and gas would be carried by winds, which could eventually reach your location. Depending on your location, you may need to take cover or wear a mask to protect yourself from the ash and gas. The second mechanism is through the ground. The vibrations from the earthquake could trigger landslides and other ground failures. These could happen even if you were far away from Yellowstone National Park. If you're outside, move to a safe location away from trees, power lines, and buildings. If you're inside, stay away from windows and doors. Be prepared for aftershocks as they may cause further damage. Even if you manage to survive the initial eruption and the subsequent earthquake, you still need to be careful. The ash and gas would eventually make their way to your location and cause widespread devastation. The ash would cover everything and make it difficult to breathe. You would need to wear a mask to protect yourself from the ash and gas. The ash would also contaminate the water supply, so you would need to boil water before drinking it. Food would be in short supply as the ash would destroy crops and disrupt the supply chain. You would need to ration your food and be prepared to go without food for several days or even weeks. But what if you lived in a major city? If you live in a major city, you would need to be especially careful. The ash and gas would eventually make their way to your location and cause widespread devastation. The ash would accumulate on roofs and power lines, causing them to collapse. This would cause widespread blackouts and disrupt essential services such as water and gas. The ash would also make it difficult to breathe, so you would need to stay indoors and wear a mask. The city would likely be evacuated as the situation became too dangerous to handle. You would need to leave the city as quickly as possible and bring enough supplies to last you several weeks. In short, if Yellowstone Supervolcano erupted today, it would be a disaster of epic proportions. The immediate area would be completely destroyed and the rest of the country would be affected by the ash and gas. You would need to be prepared for the worst-case scenario, and have a plan in place for what you would do if Yellowstone Supervolcano erupted today. Now watch what really happens to your body when frozen in ice, or check out this video instead.